Welcome back to this Monday edition of Texas Weather Live. For the last part of the show today, I'm just going to talk all things daylight saving time, the history of it, where we sit today, how it came to be, everything in between. There's quite a few bumps along the way, which I thought were interesting. And again, I said this at the beginning of the show, I'm no political expert, so bear with me here because we're talking about different acts, Congress, the Senate, House, everything in between, because this is all about politics here. But some key dates that I want to highlight: 1916, that's kind of where we saw everything start. 1942, 1966, 1974, 2022, and then we'll wrap it up with how things sit today. So starting at the beginning of this timeline with 1916 and 1942, we're going to be talking about both the world wars because this is actually how it started off. I know many people might think that this was something that was created to help farmers have longer days to work in the fields. That's the impression I was under prior to doing, honestly, today's studies. I know other people claim that Benjamin Franklin started this, but actually it was a matter of trying to be energy efficient, and it was first introduced by Germany in World War I, and before the U.S. adopted it 2 years later, 1918, and it was first just a wartime measure, so we just used it during World War I, and then it was repealed. And some interesting newspaper clippings came out during that time. This is one from The Sun, January 18th, 1918. The headline here: Daylight Saving, Important War and Economic Measure. So this is from the U.S., people starting to notice that Germany starting to tap into this, and some political propaganda actually came from this, which there's one political cartoon that I want to highlight here. It says, "Saving daylight. Uncle Sam, your enemies have been up and are at work on the extra hour of daylight. When will you wake up?" So people urging the U.S. to kind of get on board with this, and 2 years later we did. 1918 is when we started that, and then it was repealed. Fast forward to the next World War. We're now in the 40s. 1942, we put that into place, and it varied from state to state, really in between, where the war came to an end, and then it was kind of a free-for-all, and it was up to the discretion of the states. Everyone really continued to do that except for two states, which are Arizona and Hawaii, and we'll kind of talk about what that looks like a little bit later. But from the 1940s, 1945, at the end of the war, through about 1966, it was all over the place, which kind of messed with everything from transportation to your daily habits, but also we talked about energy efficiency. That also had a huge impact on that nationwide. So people are urging, let's get on the same page here nationwide. Let's figure out a system that works, and that's where we hit 1966. That's the Uniform Time Act, where Congress passed this in an effort to be uniform across the country and stop the free-for-all, basically. So looking into that, kind of talking about what that looked like for us, this is the act that, again, came into effect in 1966, and it just says, "This is to promote the observance of a uniform system of time throughout the United States." The date here is April 13th, 1966. The act goes on to say, "Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, the act may be cited as the Uniform Time Act of 1966. And this kind of kicked off what we currently know as daylight saving time. So from the 60s now, a lot of it is still very similar. There are some differences, though, that I want to highlight. The first being this right here, where this kind of sets the original start and end date of daylight savings, which originally the start of it was the last Sunday of April, still at 2 a.m., which is still something that we do. And then the end date was the last Sunday of October. Now our period of time goes from the beginning of March to the beginning of November. So just a little bit of shift, but still kind of seasonal there, with spring being the start of it and fall being the end of that. And then one other thing I want to highlight is the time zones here. So they actually, in this act, kind of outline different time zones across the country. There's 8 of them listed in this act. Now, we only use 6 of these. So Atlantic, Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, and then Alaska and Hawaii. We still utilize all of those, but Yukon and the Bering Standard Time, we don't utilize, but they are highlighted in this of 8 different time zones back in 1966. So kind of designating that this is going to be the standard time zone, or the standard practice of time across all of these time zones. Again, Arizona, Hawaii opted out of this. They still practice standard time. Okay, now we're moving to the 70s. There was a little blip here. This is kind of one of the bumps in the roads. 1974, this was the height of the energy crisis in the United States. And in an effort to conserve energy, the U.S. decided to go back to permanent daylight saving time. Well, this turned out to be kind of a mess because There was a major concern for safety, actually. This is a newspaper clipping that you can see school children in 1974 walking to the bus in the dark. That was a big concern for parents across the country because the sunrises were so late that they were going to school in the dark. Also, there was a major uptick in traffic accidents because there was longer periods during the morning commute where the sun was still down. So there was pretty much no public support from this in the 70s, and it was quickly repealed just a year later. Then we fast forward, we're back to resetting the clocks in April and October. We shift that again from March to November. Now we go to 2022. You probably remember in recent years, there's been some backlash with how we do things, resetting the clocks twice a year. The Sunshine Protection Act, which was kind of pushed in 2022, that is our more recent effort to keep daylight saving time permanent year round. So no more switching the clocks. We would just enter into that and then stay there. 20 of the 50 states are in favor of that. Texas is not one of those. And many states along the South and the Gulf Coast also not in favor of that. And because many of us remember what happened in 1974, where public support just plummeted for that because of the danger concerns. So today, here's how we sit. Pretty much everybody's still following daylight saving time, where just this past Sunday, we sprung forward. We'll fall back in November, except for the exception of Arizona and Hawaii. And the last thing I want to show is this fun graphic that our producers put together for me that we got to show yesterday when we did, or Sunday. Yeah, that was yesterday. Oh my gosh, what day is it? When we sprung forward. So if you don't have any clocks that automatically reset, be sure you set that or you're going to be late. There we go.